Last week, we began looking at Paul's letter to the Romans, the Christians who lived in Rome. Paul is frustrated that he has not been able to visit them in person. His only other option is to write a letter and to have someone take it to Rome for him. In his letter, Paul tries to sum up the essentials of Christian living. In chapter 1 last week, we saw that Paul was talking about living by faith, as opposed to living by rules or law. This means listening to God's Spirit, leading us and telling us what to do and say, and to put that into practice. It can feel risky because often we don't understand why God wants us to be doing or saying these things. It's all about trusting God and having faith in Him. In chapter 2 this week, Paul moves on to judging others. It follows on from the Jewish culture of living by rules or law. People had to work hard at obeying the rules, and if they saw someone else breaking the rules, it would make them angry, and they would go and tell the other person off. How do you feel when someone tells you off for doing something wrong or for making a mistake? In my experience, I feel grumpy or angry myself, and it might well end up in a shouting match. When I am accused of doing something wrong, it makes me defend myself and often criticise the other person for some mistake on their part. Everyone ends up stressed, cross, and angry. It is really damaging for friends and relationships too. It makes observers around us want to keep clear in case such conflict might happen to them too. That's why Paul speaks so much about not judging others. However, Paul's efforts to encourage people not to judge each other are themselves judgmental. He even threatens those who judge others with the judgment of God. Ouch. Paul does say that God shows no partiality, that He is fair to everyone, whether Jew or non-Jew. God deals with us in His love. Paul is doing his best, but there's no hiding that Paul's early life was totally committed to being a Pharisee, someone who was zealous in their obedience to the Jewish religious laws. Judgmentalism was at the heart of their religious practice. It leads to pride in one's own performance and negative criticism of those who don't manage to comply with the law. They were fiercely opposed to the teachings of Jesus. Jesus brought love, faith, and acceptance to everyone. That's what Paul is trying to teach to the Romans in this part of his letter. In Matthew's Gospel, we read one of Jesus' examples about not judging. As someone who wears glasses and who used to wear contact lenses, it makes perfect sense to me. When something gets into your eye, everything else has to stop until you've got it out. I can still remember the time as a boy when we were playing on the beach and I got sand in my eye. I tried to rub it out and that made it stick to my eyeball. I had to keep my eyes shut. I couldn't see. Eventually, my mum took me to the eye hospital in Edinburgh and they managed to see the speck in my eye and take it out. Ever since the church began, we have struggled to put Jesus' teaching into practice. Jesus calls us to live a perfect life, harming no one, helping everyone, loving our neighbour and even our enemy. It's impossible, yet it's worth all of our efforts to do our best. Last week I spoke about climbing Ben Nevis. Not that I've ever managed to do that myself. My wife Liz has climbed the mountain, and my daughter Katie has done it twice. You can't do it in one mighty leap. You can only climb the mountain step by step, and many of them. How would you feel if you reached the top and the first thing someone said to you was, "What took you so long?" How would I feel if every time I was happy for managing to climb a hill, my wife pointed out that it was only a wee hill and that I've never climbed Ben Nevis? Helpful encouragement is always better than negative criticism. But like top sportsmen and people in other professions, if we aspire to excellence, then we have to take a realistic view of how we are doing. We need to pay attention to when we make mistakes and hurt other people, so that we can work harder at avoiding these situations. It can be helpful to have our shortcomings pointed out to us, but only when it is done lovingly and sensitively, waiting for the right time. "Come on, you can do it, just one more step," is always far more encouraging than "You're useless, I don't know why you bother, you'll never be as good as I am." Jesus was continually encouraging and teaching his disciples to reach higher. He commended them when they did well. He encouraged them to try things out and promised to back them up if it didn't go well. Indeed, quite a few of the gospel stories tell of the disciples' efforts to do something and Jesus rescuing them afterwards. Perhaps the best example of this is Peter walking on the water. When he sees Jesus walking on the water, Peter is afraid, like the others in the boat. But he calls out, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus replies, "Come." Halfway there, Peter's nerve fails and he begins to sink. But he calls to Jesus, "Lord, save me." And Jesus catches his hand and together they walk back to the boat. This story sounds far-fetched, but whether it happened or not, the teaching point remains valid. If you want to walk on water, you've got to get out of the boat. It's a Christian book title by John Ortberg. Well, Peter tried it. It worked, but he needed the help of Jesus. And that's the same for all of us. If we don't start walking, we won't get anywhere. But if we try it on our own, we'll never get anywhere. You could criticize Peter for being silly. You could judge him for having failed. But no one else got out of the boat. Peter responded to Jesus' call to come, and together they made it back to safety. Jesus said, "Do not judge, so that you may not be judged." Amen.